Chapter 4. With a deep, unconscious sigh that even the telescreen couldn't stop him from letting out as he began his workday, Winston pulled the speakwrite closer, blew dust off its mouthpiece, and put on his glasses. He then unrolled and clipped together 4 small paper cylinders that had popped out of the pneumatic tube to the right of his desk. The cubicle walls had 3 openings. To the right of the speakwrite was a small pneumatic tube for written messages. To the left was a larger one for newspapers. And in the side wall, easily accessible, was a big rectangular slot protected by a wire grating. This slot was for disposing of waste paper. Similar slots existed in thousands throughout the building, not just in every room, but also at short intervals in every hallway. They were called memory holes. When someone knew a document was set for destruction, or even when they spotted a scrap of paper lying around, it became automatic to lift the flap of the nearest memory hole and drop it in. The paper would then be swept away on a current of warm air to the massive furnaces hidden somewhere in the depths of the building. Winston looked over the 4 slips of paper he had unrolled. Each held a message of 1 or 2 lines in the abbreviated jargon used within the Ministry for Internal Communication, which was mostly made up of newspeak words. They read, Times 17th of March, 84, BB speech malreported Africa rectify, Times 19th of December, 83. Forecasts 3YP 4th quarter, 83. Misprints verify current issue, Times 14th of February, 84. Minaplenty malquoted chocolate rectify, Times 3rd of December, 83. Reporting BB day order double plus ungood refs unpersons rewrite full wise up sub anti-filing. With a faint sense of satisfaction, Winston set the 4th message aside. It was a complicated task that he should handle last. The other 3 were routine, although the second would likely involve sifting through tedious lists of figures. Winston dialed back numbers on the telescreen and requested the relevant issues of the Times, which came sliding out of the pneumatic tube after a few minutes. The messages he received referred to articles or news items that were deemed necessary to change, or, as the official term went, to rectify. For instance, the Times from March 17th stated that Big Brother, in his speech the day before, had predicted that the South Indian Front would stay calm while a Eurasian offensive would soon start in North Africa. In reality, the Eurasian Higher Command had launched its offensive in South India and left North Africa untouched. It was necessary to rewrite part of Big Brother's speech to make him predict what had actually happened. Likewise, the Times from December 19th had published the official forecasts for the output of various types of consumer goods for the 4th quarter of 1983, which was also the 6th quarter of the 9th 3-year plan. The current issue showed the actual output, which revealed that the forecasts were wildly inaccurate. Winston's job was to change the original figures to match the new ones. As for the 3rd message, it pointed to a straightforward error that could be fixed in a few minutes. Not long ago in February, the Ministry of Plenty had made a promise, using the term categorical pledge, that there would be no cut to the chocolate ration during 1984. However, Winston knew that the chocolate ration was set to drop from 30 grams to 20 at the end of the week. All he needed to do was replace the original promise with a warning that it might be necessary to cut the ration at some point in April. Once Winston dealt with each message, he clipped his corrections to the appropriate copy of the Times and pushed them into the pneumatic tube. Then, almost unconsciously, he crumpled the original message and any notes he had made, tossing them into the memory hole to be consumed by flames. He did not know the details of what occurred in the unseen labyrinth that the pneumatic tubes led to, but he understood it in general terms. Once all necessary corrections for any specific issue of the Times were collected and compiled, that issue would be reprinted, the original copy destroyed, and the corrected one placed in its place. This constant process of change applied not only to newspapers but also to books, periodicals, pamphlets, posters, leaflets, films, soundtracks, cartoons, photographs, every kind of literature or documentation that could have any political or ideological importance. Day by day and almost minute by minute, the past was rewritten. This allowed every prediction made by the party to be shown through documented evidence as correct. No news item or opinion that conflicted with the immediate needs was ever left on record. All history was a palimpsest, continually scraped clean and rewritten as often as necessary. Once an alteration was made, it would be impossible to prove that any tampering had occurred. The largest section of the records department, much larger than Winston's area, consisted of people whose job was to track down and collect all copies of books, newspapers, and other documents that had been replaced and were due for destruction. A copy of the Times that may have been rewritten a dozen times due to shifts in political alignment or mistakes made by Big Brother would still have its original date on file with no other copy to contradict it. Books were also recalled and rewritten repeatedly, reissued each time without any acknowledgement of the changes. Even the written instructions Winston received, which he always discarded as soon as he completed his tasks, never mentioned or hinted that forgery was involved. They referred only to slips, errors, misprints, or misquotations that were needed to be fixed for the sake of accuracy. But as he adjusted the Ministry of Plenty's figures, he thought it wasn't even forgery. It was simply replacing one piece of nonsense with another. Most of the material dealt with had no connection to the real world, not even the connection found in a blatant lie. Statistics were as much a fantasy in their original form as in their revised version. Many times he was expected to create figures out of thin air. For example, the Ministry of Plenty had predicted that the output of boots for the quarter would be 145 million pairs. The actual output was listed as 62 million. In rewriting the forecast, Winston marked it down to 57 million, to account for the usual claim that the quota had been exceeded. In any case, 62 million was no closer to the truth than 57 million, or even 145 million. It's likely that no boots had been produced at all. More likely, no one knew how many were made, much less cared. What mattered was that astronomical numbers of boots were reported produced on paper, while perhaps half the population of Oceania went barefoot. This discrepancy applied to every category of recorded fact, big or small. Everything faded into a shadowy world, where even the year's date became uncertain. Winston glanced across the hall. In the opposite cubicle, a small, meticulous, dark-chinned man named Tillotson worked steadily, a folded newspaper on his lap, his mouth close to the speakwrite's mouthpiece. He seemed to want to keep what he said a secret from the telescreen. He looked up, and his glasses flashed a hostile glance at Winston. Winston hardly knew Tillotson and had no idea what work he did. People in the records department rarely discussed their jobs. In the long, windowless hall with its double row of cubicles and the constant rustle of papers and murmur of voices into speakwrites, there were about a dozen people he didn't even know by name, though he saw them daily rushing through the halls or gesturing during the 2 minutes hate. He knew that next to him, a little woman with sandy hair worked tirelessly to track down and delete from the press the names of individuals who had been vaporized and were thus considered never to have existed. This seemed fitting, as her own husband had been vaporized a couple of years earlier. A few cubicles down, a mild, ineffective, dreamy person named Ampleforth, with very hairy ears and surprising skill at juggling rhymes and meter, was busy creating garbled versions, called definitive texts, of poems that had become ideologically unacceptable, yet were to be kept in the anthologies for some reason. This hall, with around 50 workers, was just one subsection, a single cell in the vast network of the records department. Beyond, above, and below, many other workers tackled an unimaginable variety of jobs. There were large printing shops with sub-editors, typographers, and studios for faking photographs. The teleprograms section had engineers, producers, and teams of actors selected for their talent in mimicking voices. There were armies of reference clerks, whose task was simply to compile lists of books and periodicals set for recall. There were vast stores for the corrected documents and hidden furnaces for destroying the original copies. Somewhere anonymous, directing brains coordinated the entire operation and dictated the lines of policy that called for this piece of history to be preserved, that one falsified and another erased entirely. The Records Department was just one branch of the Ministry of Truth. Its main job was not to reconstruct the past, but to provide the citizens of Oceania with newspapers, films, textbooks, telescreen programs, plays, novels, every type of information, instruction, or entertainment possible, from statues to slogans, from poems to biology texts, and from children's spelling books to newspeak dictionaries. The ministry had to meet all the parties' diverse needs, while also repeating the entire process at a lower level for the benefit of the proletariat. There was a whole chain of different departments focused on proletarian literature, music, drama, and entertainment in general. Here, they produced poor-quality newspapers that focused almost entirely on sports, crime, and astrology. They featured sensational 5-cent stories, movies full of sexual content, and sentimental songs created entirely by machines known as versificators. There was even a whole subsection called pornosec in Newspeak, dedicated to making the lowest form of pornography. This material was sent out in sealed packets, and no party member, except for those who worked on it, could look at it. While Winston was working, 3 messages slipped out of the pneumatic tube. They were simple matters, and he dealt with them before the 2 minutes hate interrupted him. When the hate ended, he returned to his cubicle, took the Newspeak dictionary from the shelf, moved the speakwrite aside, cleaned his glasses, and got ready for his main task of the morning. Winston's greatest pleasure in life came from his work. Although most of it was a dull routine, some jobs were so challenging and complex that you could lose yourself in them like a complicated math problem. These involved delicate forgery tasks where you had no guide except your understanding of ingsoc principles and what you thought the party wanted you to say. Winston excelled at this type of work. Occasionally, he was even given the responsibility of correcting the Times' leading articles, which were written entirely in Newspeak. He unrolled the message he had set aside earlier. It read, Times 3rd of December, 83. Reporting BB Day Order double plus ungood refs unpersons rewrite full-wise up sub anti-filing. In old speak, this could be interpreted as, the reporting of Big Brother's order for the day, in the Times on December 3rd, 1983, is extremely unsatisfactory and refers to non-existent persons. Rewrite it in full and submit your draft to a higher authority before filing. If you like our recordings, consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel, so you don't miss any more audiobooks. And next part coming soon. Till then, take care, bye.